Welcome down to my 9-foot homemade oak bar. Pour yourself a cold one. You are listening to Bucs in the Basement. My name's Chris, and Craig here is the biggest Pirates fan you'll ever meet. Let's talk Pirates baseball now. Welcome to Bucs in the Basement.
Now I see the changes in this town. They change, they say one thing, but then the next day it's different. They change, but they don't know what they want. All they do is change. Going left, going right, travel day, travel night. That's where we'll go. No excuses, no goodbyes, no one cries, no one lies. We'll never know.
I think Ben Cherington listens to Bucs in the Basement.
We know he does.
Yeah, I mean, like, he answered questions to the media that weren't even asked by the media, but we talked about them on the show. Like, I love that he's right with me. Here's his quote: "We need to improve the offense. The first base DH thing comes up because it's clear there's a lot of opportunity there." Who's been saying that for the last month and a half, 2 months? Is it me? Because I think I've been saying that. Like, that's so obvious.
And that's what you've been saying, like, pretty much every single time. It's like, okay, we got, G-Man Choi, and you're like, man, there's still an opportunity to add another major league bat in there.
Yeah.
Starting pitcher, which is something else he's talking about. And he hasn't even put catcher, like, on the radar, which we kind of really haven't either. I mean, we talked about some options, but it wasn't at the top of our priority list. Because we're thinking that at some point in time, I mean, you can pick up a catcher if you're going to just have him, be on for 1 year.
Right.
I think the big thing right now is that they're trying to work something out with Roberto Perez so that it's 2 years, but there's like some sort of option or something for the second year. And that's obviously, I think, what's happening right now.
The other thing you can go out and get very easily is another Kevin Newman. I am surprised by people that are like, whoa, that's all we got? There's guys available right now in Major League Baseball. Go take a look at the non-tendered list. Guys that play infield that can do second base, shortstop, maybe even third, that are sitting out there right now that are worth about a win above replacement in their B WAR, that can play defense and hit a little bit, that have numbers. Some of them have numbers last year better than what Kevin Newman did. And so that's not a guy who a team is going to give up a lot to acquire. Being able to move him and acquire anything that you're interested in when there really isn't a need for him anymore, as Cherington said when he was talking with reporters, like, hey, we got O'Neal Cruz. He's the shortstop. They've got plans for second base that don't include Kevin Newman. There's no place for him anymore. They were able to get something for him. I'm fine with it. It's always funny to me how hometown fans in any town, and Pittsburgh is no exception, value their own players so much greater than what the player actually is because you've watched him for so long. But trust me, that was about all you're going to get for Kevin Newman.
Yeah, I mean, it's a barely above replacement level player to a degree. I mean, last year he was, 1.1 WAR, but for the most part, that's all defensive oriented. There's a lot of, solid second base defensive players that somebody could have gotten here. And we even talked about how he was, that we probably would have tendered him because, maybe it wouldn't be forcing, Rodolfo Castro to come along quicker. It wouldn't be forcing whoever it may be. It gives O'Neal Cruz like his spot at shortstop. You still have, other players like a G1 Bay who could fill in behind Castro at second base, Marcano. There's Diego Castillo. You might want to see a little bit more of a look at him. So, you get a relief pitcher, performed well in his first taste of the majors just this past year. In 2021. 2022 was not great. He's also pitching in Great American Ballpark. And for some reason, I think to try to keep the ball in the park, because he does give up some home runs, I think they tried to have him accentuate his sinker. Because looking at a lot of stuff that he was doing before is that he was throwing like a four-seamer, like almost like 75% of the time. And then now he was throwing that less, throwing the sinker more. So I'd have to break down game by game because once he came back up for the last time when he was there for more of a stretch for the Reds this past year, I mean, his ERA was down below 3. FIP was a little bit higher. I think it was like 3.98. So showing there could be something. But the WHIP was below 1. I mean, he was like elite reliever WHIP for that last little bit that he was up towards the end of the year. So, I mean, it's a small sample size. It was like 24 of his 38 innings. So, I mean, you're taking a shot on a guy who, once again, the biggest thing about people here is the amount of control. You still have 3 more years with this guy before he would even need to go to arbitration. You were going to arbitration with Kevin Newman, and you were going to have him, what we were saying would hopefully be at the most a bench piece on your squad. That's it.
This episode of Bucs in the Basement brought to you proudly by ShopYins.com. 3 dynasties, you got one brand, it's Yins, the number 1 brand for Pittsburgh sports. I saw you on Instagram out at the Steelers game, shooting basically a Yins commercial. I saw you out there. You just have a big picture of yourself, and you're ready for the game, and you're just got Y's all over all of your clothing. Are you picking up money that I'm not getting doing that?
No, man. If I was getting money off of this, I'd probably be a millionaire at this point in time. I mean, I was out there. I was a walking Yins billboard this last time, and thanks to my uncle for the great photography on that one, because I am neither a model and he is not a photographer, and it was a pretty good shot, and I actually, I thought I looked pretty good in it. White's usually not my color. I like a little bit more of the black and gold on there, but that a lot of people commented on the sweatshirt because everybody hates the new name of the stadium, the Acrisure or whatever it is. Everybody's like, are you sure? You know what? Everybody love the sweatshirt.
Free shipping on orders, $75 or more. There's some new stuff up there just in time for the holiday shopping season, and you can get their link inside of the Bucs in the Basement show notes on the website, bucsinthebasement.com. All right, so I looked at some of the non-tenders out there. Did you go through the list yet? I mean, I know that Ben Cherington likes to go diving for another person's trash, right? Like, he's the one man's trash is another man's treasure GM, and he's been that. Unfortunately, he has no room on his 40-man because the thing is stacked. So as you go and look through the list of non-tendered players that have basically become free agents, there are some interesting names out there that I immediately perked up and said, well, that guy could still be something. Like, for example, the Angels got rid of Touki Toussaint, right-handed starting pitcher who had a nice little run in 2021 and then got injured and never made his way back up to the majors. Still young enough, could be a pitcher that I would want in my system to see is there anything that's left that he may have in him. As I scroll down, Alex Reyes is such an interesting name from the Cardinals. He was a guy who was going to be a star, never worked out for him, dealt with a lot of injuries, but that's a Ben Cherington candidate right there, a guy that probably still has a few years of baseball left. If he could just put it together, he would be somebody that I would think that a Ben Cherington would go and kick the tires on a little bit. Dominic Smith, first baseman for the Mets, a couple years ago had a really nice season and then got about 450 at-bats, and it wasn't as good as what it looked like in the small sample size, but didn't really get to play very much in 2023, and I think he's around 27 years old. And here's a guy that, might still be able to unlock something because he hasn't passed those prime years yet. Was there anybody that stood out to you? Do you think that he's still in that mindset of go out and grab somebody's trash and see whether or not it's really a treasure?
I mean, I think he is to a degree, and we were talking about it before we hopped on, Chris, about how weird it was that they're still at 40. Like, you look across Major League Baseball, and I mean, there's some teams that are like, usually like right now around like 35 to 38, 39. Just in case, you're going to pick somebody up, you wouldn't have to get rid of somebody, but it's almost like Ben Cherington, he just holds on to everything for so long. Like, he could have made so many different moves, and he could have, DFA'd. We talked about the number of players he could have, but it's almost like he doesn't want to get rid of something until he has something to immediately replace it. Like, if he wouldn't have gone out and got G-Man Choi yet and we were still waiting on our first baseman, I almost fully believe that Zach Collins would still be on the 40-man roster. So until he would have somebody to actually replace that person, that they're not gonna, step out and do something. The big name that's kind of been out there for everybody that I've seen, and that it did pique my interest like almost from the beginning. We already got one Central Division pitcher in the Kevin Newman deal, so I would think we would go out and get another guy who's fairly young and performed fairly well from the Cardinals. Alex Reyes, right-handed pitcher, made his MLB debut in 2016. He had a 1.57 ERA, 28% strikeout rate over 46 innings. Then has misses all of 2017, recovering from Tommy John. And then he only has about, I think it's like 26 and a half innings. It's something like that from 2018 to 2020. And just really hasn't, gotten back up there. And the Cardinals are like one of those types of teams that, if you're kind of forgotten for a little bit, that they'll find somebody to replace you. So there would be one. But I feel like, pitching is something they're going to have to pick up here anyway. I'm still surprised with the Robert Stevenson. That's the one I thought, or Dwayne Underwood Jr., we even said, $1.9 million tendered to Robert Stevenson, $1 million to, Dwayne Underwood Jr. It's going to fall in around that range before it would go to arbitration. Hopefully they can avoid that with those guys. But yeah, he's a guy that kind of stuck out to me. Dominic Smith was one. The Mets just kind of looked at it and said, okay, we have the cheap option that the Pirates gave us in Daniel Vogelback, who was hitting, better than Dominic Smith had. But it wasn't too long ago, 2019, that, Dominic Smith had an 881 OPS and 11 home runs. So I think that's where he might fall into like that kind of category. For the Mets and for the Pirates to kind of want him is that he's kind of a guy that's fallen out of favor, but Ben Cherington he basically looks, and we've seen this before, Chris, if somebody had a great season in AA or AAA last year, all over Ben Cherington's radar. If somebody had a good season in Major League Baseball anywhere from like 2018 on, no matter how big the sample size was, but has fallen off, in even 2021, 2022, he is usually there to scoop that kind of stuff up. And he's even said, even since picking up Ji-Man Choi, he's still mentioning first base and DH along with starting pitching more than he's mentioning, catcher or relief pitchers. Because, honestly, the bullpen, everybody's saying I'd like him to go out and sign somebody to a bigger contract within the bullpen. But as we're seeing, you can go out and last year, they give a guy a couple $1 million in the bullpen and it didn't turn out so well. But then you can go out and, Chase DeYoung, who they were like, it's like non-tendering and signing to minor league deals. And they did the same thing with Clay Holmes the year before, kind of turn out to be some of your better pitchers. So, the bullpens are so finicky. So for me, yeah, go out and get another bat. If it's a guy that could maybe play, outfield and first base, that would be awesome. First base and DH. Get a catcher. But for me, another thing is just getting starting pitching to kind of shore that up a little bit, because you're actually getting some good stuff out of Mitch Keller. JT Brubaker is kind of just been consistent. It hasn't been great, but he's been what he's been. Rowanzi's going to be there. But then if not, you're looking at Johan Oviedo and Luis Ortiz, and then Zach Thompson and Bryce Wilson again. So I think Ben Cherington has the right mindset, at least in that aspect of that. Getting Ji-Man Choi, weird, defensive minded in my mind for first base, a guy that can actually play first base. Hopefully makes O'Neal Cruz a little bit better, can maybe scoop some of the stuff or, just kind of help him with a little bit of that stuff. You're going to have Rodolfo Castro at second base now. We've seen him have little hiccups in the field. So having an actual professional first baseman out there, leading the charge with that, but to also, get somebody else in DH or get somebody else to somewhat give, Choi a little bit of a break, because, looking back on the years, it's not like Choi is going to be out there 162 games, in the season. So you're going to need maybe somebody else to play a little bit of first base. So yeah, Dominic Smith is one that I definitely noticed. And I know he's kind of been like on, the downturn, but he's still only 27 years old. So that's one. And like I said, you look like an Alex Reyes type player who, pretty much hasn't performed due to injury, but you may still be able to find something in. I think that's just kind of what he's doing. Because even with like a Newman type thing, we talked about, going after, and I know, Chris, you've been waiting for me to completely butcher this guy's name. I had to look it up on Baseball Reference and how you pronounce it, but it is Dauri Moreta, I believe is how you pronounce his name. But he was in the top prospects for the Cincinnati Reds, even up until this past year. I mean, Fangraphs goes the whole way down to 50. He's around like 46, a 35 future value, but had actually pitched pretty well the year before. And even as poorly as he pitched this past season, he was still, above 1 WAR and B WAR. He was 0.1 WAR. So he's a little bit above replacement level. I mean, we were throwing guys out there last year who were like -6, negative 0.6, negative 0.8. So you got a guy that's a little bit younger and has control. So
well, I've replaced Kevin Newman already with the non-tendered list. I've already found somebody who's outperformed Kevin Newman for the last 3 years, is a plus defender, outperformed him at the plate for the last 3 years, and was equal to him 4 years ago. 28 years old, Danny Mendick, plays second base, shortstop, third base. Right there. You could find a guy who actually hit better than Newman and is actually coming off a really good season where what did he do in a small sample size? This is a Ben Cherington candidate if I ever saw one in my life before. 289 with a 786 OPS. He had over a 900 OPS against left-handed pitching and was still about 730 against right-handed pitching and plays plus defense. And so you sit around and you go, how can we get rid of Kevin Newman? Because guys like that are sitting out there who I could put side by side right now and tell you Pirate fans that guy is better than Kevin Newman, and he's just sitting in the wind right now. So if the Pirates really still need a Kevin Newman type player, they could pick up a Danny Mendick or probably 3-4 other guys that can do the same job. So that's what I noticed when we were going through the list here.
Yeah, and I think that, we were talking about beforehand, Chris, that this kind of explains the Jared Triolo, his protection on the 40-man a little bit better. At least it does for me.
You think he's the replacement? Like he's the guy that would likely slide into that Newman spot right now because he could at least do what Newman did.
Yeah, and here's the thing is, I mean, we talked about why he was protected. He was, the defender of the year within our minor league system for the past 2 years, Gold Glove in the minor leagues 2 years ago, plays third base, shortstop, plays center field, probably means he could also play second base, at the major league level. So it's almost looking that, we're going to give O'Neal Cruz his run. But if O'Neal Cruz was injured, God forbid, knock on wood, for a significant period of time, or just wasn't working out, at shortstop, and we were thinking about making that move to the outfield, I feel like they would feel more secure in, being able to be provided good defense by Triolo, which his defense would play right now within the major leagues. We've seen like how well Brian Hayes' defense has transitioned. That's where Triolo keeps on getting compared to defensive wise, and kind of hits the same way as well. So you're not looking at like a big hitter. Well, I mean, that's pretty much what you're getting from Kevin Newman. So, why wouldn't you give, O'Neal Cruz his run? Why wouldn't you look to see more, from Rodolfo Castro, from a G1 Bay?
So let me ask you this question. Like, I'll be the dumb fan here. Okay. I can look on prospect list and I can find Peguero much higher than Triolo. And they both are playing at about the same level in the majors. So why wouldn't Peguero be the guy in that case if Cruz all of a sudden wasn't playing shortstop? I know we're going down a rabbit hole here and that wasn't the main point of what you were putting in, but like is it gotten to the point where even though National Prospect List put these guys in a different order, the Pirates have that order flipped? Do you think? I
think to a certain degree, and I think that's another reason why they would, kind of protect Triolo is that I don't think Liover Peguero has taken the step forward that many people, I mean, I think national pundits, but also within the organization, thought he was going to take. I believe that his defense will come around. He definitely has some errors. He's working on a little bit of footwork stuff. He's working on, it's a lot of the stuff with the arm. The same with Cruz. They have, Cruz has an 80 grade arm. Peguero's is just a little bit below that. And they think they can make up like their little bit of mistakes with that arm and just have a lot of throwing errors. So I would think that that's where Triolo would be protected. He's also, Brian Hayes hasn't been the healthiest. So you have possibly a Castro sliding over there, a Triolo sliding over there. It gives you more flexibility. That's the thing within the Pirates is the more versatility. Like I said, Triolo is third base, shortstop, center field, and if he can play third base and shortstop, I guarantee he can probably play some second base, especially now, with the shift regulation rules or the shift reduction rules. That you would need a little bit of a better player defensively at the second base position. So I think he's almost like that defensive replacement type thing. I think with Leover, he is going to get his shot at some point in time, but I think it was just a little bit disappointing because once he went back down to Double-A, it wasn't a name that you heard a lot from after that. He definitely started to struggle, but I mean, we've seen that before. I mean, Castro last year, after he got sent back down, started to struggle in Double-A, and even the times that he, got sent back down the first time this year, he, wasn't like this huge powerhouse, but was able to come back up. But I think that if it was a short-term thing, I think you might see Peguero pop up in there again. But I honestly think that it's one of those guys, Jared Triolo might fall into, they're not worried about any type of service manipulation, any type of, starting his clock early type of deal. He's not that type of prospect. So I think that would possibly play into it a little bit too. I mean, I know that we've had our conversations a bunch of times, Chris, about our feelings, concerning service time manipulation. It doesn't really bother me because I understand how the system is. And if, you can get all the good years of a prospect instead of just having them come up and play on an absolutely god-awful team, yes, I would like to see our best players out there. But then we also see how not too many guys come up and just, hit the ground running and have to be bounced up and down a few times. I mean, there wasn't really any prospects, other than Uno Cruz, who was steadily improving, throughout his time there, that we didn't see come up and then have to be really sent back down again at some point in time during the year.
Well, here, let me ask you a question about a guy who MLB.com this week listed as the best chance for a Rookie of the Year for the Pirates. They did the best chance for a Rookie of the Year for every team in Major League Baseball. So this is the guy they think could play this year and stick with the team, which I want to ask you, do you even think that he's making the opening day roster? And how quick does he get up here? And do you believe in this? I'll leave out his name real quick in case you didn't read it. Let me just read what they said. It's a pitcher who has developed into more of an efficient pitch to contact type, can miss bats at 8.9 Ks per 9 innings, has a ceiling still to reach and will be 22 years old for the 2023 season. He finished in AAA, spent most of his season in AA, and I'm talking about Quinn Priester. Do you believe that that is a legitimate rotation piece that's coming up this season? Because MLB.com seems to believe that not only is he going to be in the rotation, but he's the Pirates' best chance of a Rookie of the Year candidate.
I don't see that. I mean, that's actually fairly surprising to me. If I would have opened up that article, I would have thought it would have said Endy Rodriguez, from the word go. Because if this is my reasoning for Endy, is even if you go out and get one catcher, you're going to go out and probably get an older catcher. We even talked about our favorite, pick, our quote unquote favorite. We talked about Omar Narvaez. We talked about, Tucker Barnhart. Those guys both had a little bit of injuries last year. You go back out and get Roberto Perez, who's coming off the huge hamstring injury that's after. So that's where, to me, it would be surprising that it wouldn't be Endy. And for another thing, I'm actually just surprised that they think that Quinn Priester is going to be up there that quick and long enough to even be in the conversation for Rookie of the Year. Because the way that I would see, this rotation playing out is that it would start off Roanzi, Mitch, JT. And then you're going to have at least one free agent, because that's what Ben Cherington's done these past 2 years with the Tyler Anderson, with the Jose Quintana. You're going to have at least one. We've even discussed, and he's even discussed, the possibility of a second one, which they tried with, Trevor Cahill and Derek Holland and other people in other instances, but actually getting two decent starting pitchers. Then you have Johan Oviedo. Then you have Luis Ortiz. Then you possibly have Cody Bolton if he makes it through the Rule 5. I mean, to see Quinn Priester getting more than... I saw him possibly getting like the Roanzi Contreras treatment, from the previous year, that we might see him for the last weekend of this year coming up. I mean, the guy's only 22 years old, doesn't have to be protected from the Rule 5 until, next December. So he's a guy that I thought, you might see in, August, September maybe. So, but for Rookie of the Year, you're thinking he's coming up in like
early.
Yeah, like
you would think that he was coming up early. That's why it surprised me. That's why I read it for you, because I looked at it and I was like, really? Because I didn't have him on my radar, and I was like, is he really somebody that's going to come walking in the door all of a sudden and have an opportunity to break into a staff? Because if you're going to list him like that, then that's what you're trying to say as the person that is analyzing this for MLB.com and putting this article out, that you actually believe that's what's going to happen. I mean, he had 15 starts in Double-A in Altoona, and he had 2 starts in Indianapolis. Now, over those starts, he looked good. Okay? Anytime I see, my rule on walks and hits per innings pitched, he's right in the range where he should be. In fact, he was ace quality when he was in Altoona with that. Okay? And he was sufficient in Triple-A Indianapolis. I don't know if I'm starting him, though, up in the majors. Like, if he has a big spring, who knows? But you're right. I think Endy is the guy that I would think could be the rookie that breaks out this year for the Pirates. I was looking on CBS Fantasy Sports site. You and I are in the same league there. I've won several championships. You're always in last place. But they put out a list. Scott White put out a list. He's their main writer over there, of the top 10 catching prospects for fantasy baseball for 2023. He listed not only Henry Davis 4th, but Endy Rodriguez 6th. Now, when he writes about Davis, he's not really saying he's going to make it there. But when he writes about Endy Rodriguez, I'm going to read what he had to say. I'm tempted to stick my neck way out for Rodriguez, moving him even ahead of Davis at this surprisingly crowded position. This is all catching prospects for fantasy catcher. And let's be honest, you're not putting guys on the list unless you think they're making it to the majors sometime soon, because we're talking about fantasy sports here, okay? Somebody's going to be in the minors for several years. I mean, maybe for a dynasty league, this makes a little bit of sense. But generally, if you're up high on one of these lists, it's because Scott White thinks there's a chance you might play during the season that's coming up, or at least be out there for a dynasty league in 2024. And this is what he's writing about with Rodriguez. Discounting, he says he would have stuck his neck out, but discounting the pedigree of a former number 1 overall pick seems like a fairly reckless move. So he's basically saying, I would put Rodriguez in front of Davis if Davis wouldn't have been picked so high in the draft. That's how much he valued Endy Rodriguez. As for Rodriguez, he got better with every step up the ladder, batting .386 with a 1.193 OPS from June 25th on, and is versatile enough to man the outfield on his off days behind the plate. That's the guy I would think. I'm with you. Could be the rookie that busts out this year for the Pirates, and we're all very excited about by July.
Yeah, and I think that they are being overly cautious to not put him ahead of Davis, but I mean, who
cares where you're drafted, right? I mean, you still have to develop, you still have to become a Major League Baseball player, and Major League Baseball and the minor leagues are riddled with guys who are first-round draft picks who don't work out. And just because you're in the top 10 doesn't mean you ever become a major leaguer or an effective one. Now, we want Henry Davis to do it. There's nothing that says that he won't. But if you have to rank the Pirates catchers right now in the system, Endy Rodriguez is the best catcher in the system right now, correct?
Absolutely, and he's the next man up within AAA. I would have to assume. I think that they, that's why there's going to be who they're going to sign, whoever it's going to be, Roberto Perez or a Roberto Perez, will say, and then one of Ali Sanchez. I mean, there still could be somebody out there that they grab up, whoever it would be, that would probably get, the shot before an Endy Rodriguez. But I would see that as where, I still think that they want to see a lot of these pitchers, and I don't see where Quinn Priester, I mean, you're almost hoping that he's just going to like splash onto the scene, like AKA like a Spencer Strider or something, and like just take over and not be sent back down. But that's also for a team that was in line to compete. I just can't see the Pirates. That's where one thing it just doesn't line up to me is I can't see the Pirates doing that when he's only 22 years old and they don't have to protect him yet, don't have to add him to the 40-man, that he would be up. It would be kind of going against everything that they've done so far.
Interestingly enough, in the article by Scott White, he also talks about how Endy Rodriguez could very easily be second amongst all catching prospects on his list that he put out this past week, behind Francisco Alvarez. And the only reason Alvarez would be higher is because he's hitting so well, because Alvarez is not a very good defensive catcher. I mean, it's really, if you're a Pirates fan, when you start seeing these little things, it should make you excited. There's a reason, I think, why there's not a big rush to go get a catcher. I think everybody's really surprised by that because Ben Cherington isn't talking about it. I think his catcher is Endy Rodriguez, and a veteran to be named.
Now I see the change.